It is finally spooky season as we enter October, but the scariest thing for us BA global players are the back-to-back limited banners this month, starting with the return of Toki's and Nagisa's limited banners this upcoming Tuesday. Where there's Toki, there's victory, and where there's tea party, there's hope. I don't usually say the banner names, but theirs is honestly so cool, I just wanted to try and say it, as well as Koyuki's rerun banner, though I sadly won't be covering our adorable pink gremlin this time. So, without further ado, here is a short review of the two returning units. Kicking things off with call sign 04, it's Kivotos' perfect mate, Asuma Toki. Here's a fun fact, out of all the CNC girls, she is actually my favorite member, due to a few reasons. For one, I'm in love with her design. That blonde hair wrapped in a bun and those fringes in the front is extremely cute to me. And combined with that gorgeous face, those bewitching blue eyes, alongside the serious piercing gaze that she wears all the time, I find all of that very attractive for some reason. Not only that, I love how even though she's supposed to be a kudere, she's capable of showing so much emotion. I am a big fan of her acting very dorky, all while donning a serious stoic expression, like the classic
peace, peace.
And I really like how she often expresses her affection for Sensei, such as accompanying him throughout the day and her desire to prepare a full chocolate assortment for us during Valentine's. Not to mention, the fan arts and comics of Toki being affectionate with Sensei are so sweet, it's borderline diabetes inducing. Finally, while she may not have the biggest badonkadongs or the thickest of gyats, like some of the other CNC members, sorry Naru, for me, I still find her really hot, and this is mostly thanks to the copious amounts of amazing Toki fan art, especially those of her with her hair down in casual clothes, and who can forget all the Toki doujins, the R18 art, good golly gumdrops, I have lost gallons to her. All in all, a beautiful, hot, dorky kudereme who is clingy, unafraid to convey her love for you, as well as having her own goddamn Gundam suit, phallus. This is wife material right here. Let's move on to the type of student she is. Toki is a limited explosive DPS striker with elastic armor, and she has the following terrain modes: S combat power in urban terrains, D combat power in field, and B combat power indoors. She also uses the standard DPS equipment set, which consists of hat, pin, and watch. Now, it's time to take a look at her skills. First off, Toki has an initial 2-cost EX, where she summons her own AC, the Abi Assure Power Suit. In this mode, her attack, accuracy, and evasion are increased, and her EX basic skill and normal attack patterns are changed. Plus, this mode expires after her new EX skill is used thrice. Her new 5-cost EX fires 3 lasers, all of which ignore a percentage of the enemy's defense, with the first and second lasers dealing damage to enemies in a straight line. The third laser, which is much more powerful, deals damage to the targeted enemy while inflicting additional damage to other enemies in a straight line as well. Her basic skill outside of and while in Abi Assure mode is almost the same, as it deals damage to one enemy every 35 seconds. Though in Abi Assure mode, this attack can ignore the enemy's defense by a certain amount. Her enhanced skill increases her attack, and for her sub skill, while she is in Abi Assure, her EX grows stronger with each use, being able to inflict more additional damage. This extra damage can also ignore the enemy's defense, and the count resets when she exits Abi Assure. At UE40, her enhanced skill plus grants her more attack, and at UE50, her urban combat power improves from S to SS. So, how good is Toki? Well, she is certainly a strong raid DPS unit whose power mainly stems from her Abi Assure mode. In this mode, her offensive capabilities are massively improved, and she is able to deal tons of damage due to a few reasons. Firstly, her new EX skill when equipped with the Abi Assure Power Suit is quite powerful, as its numbers are pretty high. while the first and second lasers each only have a multiplier of 167% at max level EX. The third laser's multiplier goes as high as 1153%. So all three shots combined means her multipliers can reach up to a whopping 1487%. Not to mention, the damage she deals to the other enemies who are in range during the third shot is also decent, with a multiplier of 230% at level 5 EX. Next, her sub-skill further boosts her EX's power, as basically its damage increases the more times you use it, up to a total of 3 times before she exits Abe Assure, resetting the counter. At level 10 sub-skill, her EX can deal 25.6% additional damage during the first EX use, 51.1% during the second, and up to 76.7% for the third and final use, all of which allows Toki to hit even harder with her EX. Moreover, her basic skill is pretty strong too, being able to dish out respectable damage with its 778% multiplier at level 10, and its fairly short activation time of 35 seconds is an added bonus as well, though this skill does become much stronger in Abe Assure mode. More on that in a bit. Other than those, whenever Toki transforms into Abe Assure mode, she gains increased stats. Specifically, her attack, accuracy, and evasion are increased by 41.8%, 18.1%, and 12.2% respectively at max level EX, with the attack buff helping to further boost her damage output. Not only that, at UE40, she gains even more attack stats, which make her hit harder. And finally, the best thing about her Abe Assure mode is her ability to ignore a percentage of the enemy's defense. And this is Toki's main selling point. When in Abe Assure mode, her EX basic skill and the additional damage from her sub-skill are all able to ignore the enemy's defense, with her defense penetration values reaching up to a huge 60% at max level skills, thus making her even stronger and much more effective against enemies with high defense. With all that being said, she does have a few weaknesses, one of which is that she must be in Abe Assure mode in order to even start dealing decent damage, as her entire kit revolves around it, and her normal form is pretty weak. Furthermore, Toki does require a lot of cost and maintenance. While the initial EX cost of transforming into Abe Assure mode is very cheap at 2 costs, her new damage dealing EX is pretty expensive at 5 costs. And considering you'd ideally want to use it 3 times to get the most out of it, you'd need a total of 15 costs. Plus adding in the 2 costs from earlier, the amount goes up to 17 costs. And this can definitely affect your EX skill rotations. You can technically still use cost reduction units to cut a cost down to 3, but in teams that don't/can't have these cost cutting units, perhaps due to team building issues, her Abe Assure mode can be quite hard to keep up as you need a lot of costs to fund it. Lastly, due to how her kit works, Toki is much more suited for longer battles, as she is more likely to transform multiple times, which is needed in order to unleash her full damage potential, as opposed to in shorter fights, where she'd probably only be able to transform once and use her new EX 1 to 2 times. Hence, as you can tell, Toki is very much a pure damage dealer, focused on dishing out damage, and she doesn't offer much in terms of utility. Let's move on to her users. While Toki is primarily a raid single target DPS, her EX does have slight AoE capabilities, allowing her to be somewhat useful against groups of raid mobs. Though again, hers isn't as wide or effective like other traditional raid AoE units. Thus, she is usable in certain content such as early mission stages or in specific joint firing drills. However, her best use lies in raid raids, specifically against bosses with high defense due to her defense penetration abilities. As such, she often saw a lot of use in Urban Hieronymus, being brought into many players' torment teams. In this raid, you would first need her to transform into Abe Assure mode in order to start dealing proper damage, since her EX and basic skills will be able to ignore up to 60% of his exorbitant defense in this mode, letting her deal tons of damage to him. And once you buff her with units such as Aku and Himari, her damage output greatly increases. Not only that, she will also take 0.5 times damage from his explosive attacks on Insane and Torment due to her elastic armor, improving her survivability. Unfortunately, a lot of players usually opt for Swimsuit Nonomi instead of Toki for Urban Hero, as her damage output is much higher due to her fast hard-hitting attacks, making her the preferred choice over Toki on Insane difficulty cause she can clear it quicker, earning you a higher score. Albeit for Torment, you can still very much use Toki as your main DPS unit in your second to third teams. Other than Hyro, you could perhaps use her in Urban Raid Grand Assault Binner, since the Giant Snake does have a lot of defense as well, so Toki's defense ignore could prove to be very useful against him. Or maybe in Raid Grand Assault Indoor Pararodzilla, where she could deal good damage to Pararos minions, hitting multiple of them while ignoring up to 60% of their high defense. However, in content with enemies that have low defense, she sadly isn't as effective, and you're better off using other raid DPS students. So overall, should you pull for Toki? Well, while she is a pretty strong raid damage dealer, she honestly doesn't see much use outside of Urban Hero Torment, as she is competing with other powerful raid DPS units who are a much better fit in other content. For instance, Dress Hina, who is currently the main go-to raid DPS for most raid content. Even in Urban Hero, she still hasn't seen much use lately, primarily because we haven't had an Urban Hero raid with Raid Torment for a while. There was an Urban Hero GA a couple months back in JP, but Torment was blue for that one. So, since Insane difficulty was the highest for raid, like I previously mentioned, Swimsuit Nonomi is the preferred option for this difficulty. Nevertheless, you can still pull for Toki if you want a solid raid DPS option for one of your Urban Hero Torment teams. Or if she is your waifu and you think her mech is really cool. You can also pull for her if you don't have her since she is limited. However, Nagisa and the AS units who are arriving next week are limited students as well. So if you're low on Paroxenes and you don't have Toki yet, you will need to decide on your own who to go for. On the other hand, you may also skip Toki if you already have her, or if you don't care about limited students and you're content with just using Dress Hina to blitz through a lot of raid content. It's time for the next limited unit, and it's none other than the president and host of Trinity's Tea Party, Kirifuji Nagisa. I know there are a few senseis out there who still don't like Nagisa because of her paranoia during Volume 3, but your honor, in her defense, she has matured into a good person, plus she's beautiful and cute. I love her beautiful sleek ash blonde hair, as well as her entire dignified look, as expected from one of Trinity's leaders, such as that elegant flower on her hair, that cream-colored conservative uniform which gives her an even classier look, as well as those black pantyhose and white high heels. God damn, you know she's packing some nasty, delicious grippers down there. And it's no wonder even PD Kim Yong-ha couldn't resist licking her feet. And to top it all off, she's voiced by the Sayori Hayami. And to this day, I still can't fathom how the fuck they got her to voice Nagisa. Sadly though, I feel Nagi has been done kinda dirty by the devs. Cause despite being a major character in the Eden Treaty storyline, she has mostly been shelved afterwards, barely making an appearance in any story or events, outside of a cameo in Trip Trap Train and brief appearances in Volume F. Plus her relationship stories were pretty disappointing, as a character has basically been dumbed down to haha funny tea and roll cake lady go brr. Though her Valentine's event was excellent, since it gave us a nice wholesome interaction with Nagisa, the leader of Trinity's Tea Party, and not the crazed tea maniac that the game makes her out to be. In fact, it's to the point where she has become known for other things among the community, such as being easily flustered, her obsessive love for Hifumi, like listening to Hifumi Daisuki all day, being overly dependent on sensei, and etc. And might I remind you, all of these are just fanon and not canon to her character. Nevertheless, the most important thing right now is that she has returned, and I'm sure a lot of Nagisa enthusiasts such as Zetsu and Rohan Sensei are over the moon. But my question is, when Nagisa out next on, Finally, to end this part, I'd like to invite Nagisa's friend and fellow Tea Party president, Yurizono Seiya, to say a few words on her rerun. Seiya-chan, dozo. Hi, arigatou gozaimasu. Thank you Seiya for the wonderful speech. I hope you guys could hear it. So, what kind of student is she? Well, Nagisa is a limited special explosive damage dealer whose terrain moods are as such: terrible affinity in urban terrains, average in field, and excellent indoors. She also uses hat, bag, and watch for her equipment, which is pretty typical for certain special AoE DPS units. Let's take a look at her skills. Nagisa has a 3-cost EX where she first decreases the defense of raid armored enemies for 15 seconds. Then she deals damage to them in a round-shaped area. Her basic skill, which activates every 50 seconds, heals the ally with the lowest health. And if the target is a Trinity student, this healing is increased. And if it's Mika being healed, she gets an extra roll cake. Her enhanced skill boosts her attack, and her sub-skill amplifies all explosive type allies' crit damage. She gains additional crit damage at UA 40 on her enhanced skill plus, and her indoor combat power is upgraded to SS at UA 50. So, is Nagisa any good? Well, she is a pretty strong raid DPS student, and as you can tell, she has both damage dealing capabilities and utility in her kit. First and foremost, she is able to deal decent raid AoE damage with a cheap 3-cost EX skill, having a good multiplier of 772% at max level EX. While her damage definitely isn't as high as other raid AoE damage dealers, it's still quite respectable. Plus the range is fairly wide, making her effective against groups of raid minions. Her EX can also actually become stronger, as its damage can be significantly improved with her enhanced skill plus at UA 40, which grants her additional crit damage. However, her damaging power isn't exactly her most important feature despite being a DPS unit, but rather her utilities are her main selling point, aka her AoE defense shred ability and her crit damage boosting capabilities. Starting with the former, with her EX skill, Nagisa is able to apply an AoE defense debuff onto raid armored enemies before her mortars land. And while this debuff lasts for the pretty short duration of 15 seconds, she can reduce their defense by a whole 40% at max level EX, allowing her to be extremely useful against groups of raid enemies or singular ones with high defense. Moving on to the latter, she can also passively grant a potent crit damage buff to all explosive type students in your team through her sub-skill, with this buff going as high as 24% at level 10 sub-skill. Thus, you would ideally use her in a team filled with raid students, or at the very least, the DPS units need to be explosive, as she can considerably boost their damage output with her sub-skill. Unfortunately, her buffs and debuffs have one weakness, i.e. they only work on raid armored enemies and explosive type allies, meaning she isn't very flexible and she is very much restricted to raid content and teams since her skills won't affect blue, yellow, and purple enemies/allies. Finally, she can also act as a healer as a result of her basic skill. Her heals aren't too shabby, and if the one being healed is a Trinity student, she restores even more HP. But the activation time for this skill is pretty lengthy at 50 seconds, so it's not something you can or should fully rely on. Now, where can Nagisa be used in? Well, like I mentioned earlier, as a raid AoE DPS unit, she is obviously excellent for raid AoE content as she is able to demolish a ton of raid mobs with her EX skill. This makes her useful in a number of content such as mission stages and specific joint firing drills, like the ones with a bunch of raid minions, and if they have high defense, she is even more effective. However, her main use lies in raids, where she is primarily used against raid bosses and in raid teams. Cause again, raid enemies and allies are required for her defense down debuff and crit damage buff to take effect. Nagisa actually sees quite a lot of use in all three traditional raid raids, Kaiten, Hieronymus, and Gregorius, being brought into many Sensei's insane/torment teams. For Kaiten, she is mainly used in the field version instead of urban, due to her better affinity in field terrains, and this is proven in the current urban Kaiten raid in JP, where as you can see, her pick rate in this terrain is pretty low, being replaced by other special units such as Q Tomoe, Kisaki, and etc. Also, while some might think that she's more valuable for phase 1, like using her EX to damage multiple ranges in one go, she is actually much more useful for phase 2, as her EX can lower his decently high defense. But more importantly, it can break his shield, since it does 20 hits. Cause remember, you need 10 hits from EX skills to destroy his shield on Insane or below, and 15 hits on Torment difficulty. Hence, many senseis opt to use her EX in this phase, as it is much more worthwhile, and she has also become a staple unit for your Dress Hina teams in this raid. For Hieronymus, she can be brought into both the urban and indoor versions, though she is extra effective in the latter terrain, and her role in this raid would simply be to lower his extremely high defense, especially on Insane and Torment, acting as a great replacement for Swimsuit Shiroko in certain team comps, and again, she is frequently paired with Dress Hina for indoor Hyro. With all that being said, her best raid is in fact Gregorius, cause for one, her EX is able to hit multiple choir members at once with its wide range, while dealing good damage to them. Not only that, she can also shred his relatively high defense stats with a potent defense debuff, which can also help increase his debuff counter. And before Dress Hina's release, when Greg first came out, she was a vital unit for this raid, being used on nearly every difficulty. Even though she isn't as important on Insane and below now, considering Dress Hina is able to literally demolish him on these difficulties, this doesn't make her obsolete, and she is still a great unit for this raid, though I'd be interested to see if Nagisa is still needed on Torment Greg, what with the existence of Dress Hina, but that remains to be seen cause we haven't had a raid Torment Greg in quite a while. Furthermore, in all 3 raids, she has the added role of improving your other raid students' damage output by passively boosting their crit damage with a sub-skill, and this is especially useful for your raid DPS units such as Aru, Swimsuit Nonomi, and Dress Hina, since it allows them to hit way harder. Aside from these 3 raids, you can also use her in Raid Armored Bina to lower his extremely high defense, Raid Armored Peroro to damage the Peroro minions while planting AoE defense down on them at the same time, and perhaps it'd be fun to see if she performs well in Raid Armored Kurokage, which arrives next week, since he does have a lot of defense as well, and her EX should be able to hit multiple fragments at a time. Regardless, you can bring Nagisa into any raid content, like Raid Fury of Set, purely to act as a stat stick, passively increasing your raid unit's crit damage. Finally, she does see quite a bit of use in PvP, and while I won't go into too much detail about it since I ain't a PvP expert, from what I know, she was used quite a lot last season since the enemy students were split into these 2 lanes. So Nagisa's EX was very handy in hitting multiple of them at once, being capable of destroying backline units like Shun, though she does have some accuracy issues as well, particularly against the tanks. I have also personally seen her be used a fair bit this season, but definitely not as much as last season. So, verdict time. Should you pull or skip Nagisa? Well, she is a strong raid AoE DPS unit who has a bunch of utility in her kit, making her an excellent unit for a lot of raid content, both early and late game, being used in a lot of Sensei's teams. So, in my opinion, you should pull for her, especially if you don't have her, since she would definitely be a huge help in the future. Not only that, since she is limited, you can pull for her if you're a limited collector and you didn't get her when she initially released, or if she is your waifu and you want to eat her roll cakes badly, wink wink. However, similar to Toki, if you are low on pyroxenes and don't have Nagisa, you will need to decide on your own if you want to pull for her or if you want to save for the upcoming limited units next week. Otherwise though, if you already have her, or if you don't like Nagisa and want to go for Toki instead, or you prefer to get the AS members, then you may of course skip her. And that's all for this week's review. All in all, in terms of gameplay, you might have a tough choice choosing whether to skip or pull Toki or Nagisa, especially if you don't have either of them and your paroxysms count is lower than my will to live. Since they are both good limited units, and you need to consider the type of student you need, plus the fact that B Yoshimi and B Kazus, both of whom are limited too, are arriving next week. So you need to make the decision for yourself, unless of course you have both of them, in which case you may skip and just save your paroxysms. As for Koyuki, while I didn't review her, you may just skip her and you can easily replace her with other Mystic AoE DPS units. Anyways, that's all from me. Let me know who you're pulling for if you are. Good luck with your pulls, and I'll see y'all in the next one.